It was raining the way memory sometimes returns, soft, then sudden, then gone, the kind of drizzle that doesn't bother with wetness so much as it presses into your coat like someone else's breath. The city streets had taken on their evening gloss, blurred by neon and footsteps, everything slightly behind glass. I remember that night only in fragments, the way I remember dreams I'm certain weren't mine. A black umbrella floating down an alley like a crow with no bones, the hiss of tires across puddles, a flickering pharmacy sign that spelled nothing at all. And then his voice. "Hey, you dropped your name." I turned. He was sitting against the side of a boarded-up diner, legs crossed like a child at recess, a pile of damp clothes cloaking his shoulders in patchwork grey. His eyes were too alert for someone so tattered. Not desperate, not drunk. He looked at me like I was a friend late to an appointment he never made. "I'm sorry," I said, unsure if I'd misheard. "Your name," he replied, patting the concrete beside him like he was pointing to a photograph. "It's mine too." There are certain moments when the world tilts, not violently, but enough to unseat the small assurances you wear like armor. My name isn't common, never has been. Not so rare it's impossible, but rare enough that when someone else says it, I feel a tightening in my gut, as though myself is being worn by someone else for a moment. A borrowed skin. "What's your name?" I asked, already knowing what he'd say. He smiled. Not with triumph, but a kind of relief. "You know," and I did. I knew it before he spoke it aloud. My full name, first and last, said like a line from a half-forgotten lullaby. He even paused in the middle the way I do when I say it over the phone.
I didn't believe him. Not exactly. But I didn't walk away either.
"Have we met before?" I asked. "We will," he said. "There are men who have lost everything except time, and they spend it like they're owed back pay from the world. This man, he dealt in memory, or something like it. You remember the house on Fielding Street?" he asked me, out of nowhere. My mouth went dry. I did remember a house, a dream really, brown shutters, a warped green fence, the kind of place you invent when you're trying to describe a childhood you can't verify. "It had yellow curtains in the kitchen," he added, eyes closing, voice drifting. "Smelled like cinnamon and smoke. Your mother always hummed that song, you know the one." "I don't have a mother," I said. "She died when I was 2. He looked at me, sharply now. "That's the version they let you keep." There's something about hearing the truth said wrong that feels worse than a lie. My chest tightened. I wanted to leave. I didn't. "I've never told anyone that detail about the curtains," I muttered, not even sure why I remembered it. "You didn't," he said gently. "I did." We sat in silence, rain whispering against the awning, the city moving past us like a stream we were no longer part of. "You're not me," I finally said. "Maybe not," he answered, "but I am what gets left behind when you forget something too long." I can't explain what happened next without sounding mad, but I looked at his face and for a flash saw my own. Not a twin, not a mirror, but an echo, as though a part of me had been living out there in the weather, unloved and half-spoken. He reached into his coat and handed me something wrapped in wax paper, a photograph, cracked at the edges, a child, maybe 5, standing beside a woman whose face had been scribbled out. The child looked like me, or close enough. On the back, a single word was written in shaky ink: home. I didn't ask why he had it. I didn't ask where it came from. I just stared at it like it might answer something I didn't yet know how to ask. And as I stood to leave, he said one last thing. "You think names are who we are, but names are just the shadows we cast when we forget who we've been." So, have you ever felt someone else living inside your memories? Not haunting, but waiting. Some cities resist you, others absorb you without permission. Mine, this sprawling, weather-beaten place with its rusted overpasses and bruised sky, does something stranger. It remembers you, even when you don't want it to. I moved here 6 years ago for a job I thought would make me feel more real. A quiet corner office, too many screens, late nights where the hum of fluorescent lights replaced conversation. My life became spreadsheet rows and color-coded deadlines, like I could catalog purpose into cells and columns. There were weeks I forgot what my voice sounded like outside of a Zoom call. But the city, it whispered in gutters and graffiti, in half-heard arguments through the paper-thin walls of my apartment. It left messages in the cracks of sidewalks, behind peeling movie posters, in the smell of scorched coffee from the bodega downstairs. Not messages meant for everyone, just for me. I lived in a building that seemed older than memory itself, pre-war bones held up by rust and stubbornness. My unit had water stains shaped like maps no one could name, creaking radiators that moaned at night like something remembering loss, and the mirror in the hallway, It sometimes caught me at angles I hadn't moved into, as though my reflection lived slightly out of sync, stepping forward or away a second too late. After meeting him, the other me, I couldn't stop watching that mirror, waiting for the delay to become a door. I told no one about him, not co-workers, not the girl I saw sometimes on weekends, the one who always left before sunrise. This wasn't the kind of story you could say out loud without inviting pity or pills. So I began walking the city more, hoping not to find him, but to trace something back, to unravel a knot I hadn't known was strangling me. That's when things began to slip. First, it was little details, my desk drawers rearranged, a book I swore I hadn't opened with pages dog-eared exactly the way I used to in high school. Then, a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize, an old woman's voice saying, "Come home, Eli," before a long pause and the click of breathless static. My name isn't Eli, it never has been, but it felt like mine, said that way, as if someone had stitched it into my skin before I was born. I started keeping a notebook, not for sanity, for proof. Dates, times, phrases I heard in dreams, words I found scrawled on napkins in my coat pocket. One read, "Fielding Street, find the yellow curtains, she never left." I hadn't told him about the dreams. I hadn't told anyone about the dreams. But there they were, pages of them, written in my handwriting. Only, not quite. A leftward slant, slightly taller letters, like my hand was being guided by something just adjacent to my own intention. The dreams themselves were simple, but heavy. A rocking chair turning slowly in an empty room, a hallway where the floor fell away. The more I walked toward the door, a voice singing the same lullaby again and again, one line short. I never remembered the last note. It always dissolved into waking. And then came the photographs, folded in half under my doormat, slipped between pages of my old college books. Always the same boy, always the same almost smile. Me, but not the me I remember. A version from a childhood I've never fully trusted. In one, he's holding a toy aeroplane I swore I never owned. In another, he's holding hands with a woman whose face is always obscured by glare, by motion, or by crude ink. I began to wonder if the man I met in the alley wasn't a stranger at all, but the only one brave enough to remember. Was he a ghost, a symptom, a story I'd buried so deeply I needed a body to dig it up? Or was he something else entirely? Something that had worn my name longer than I had? I started seeing him in crowds, a flicker of his coat as the train pulled away, the silhouette of his shoulders in shop window reflections, sometimes just a breath, warm and stale on the back of my neck when no one was behind me. He wasn't haunting me, he was inviting me to what I didn't yet know. If your past reached out in your own voice, would you follow it, even if it meant losing who you've become? It began with a letter, a real letter, not typed or stamped, not formalized into the sterile language of debt or discount. This one had been left on my pillow, not mailed, not slipped under the door, placed, carefully, intimately. The envelope was made from old ledger paper, its crease worn soft from folding. My name was written on the front in graphite, uneven and urgent, but it was the handwriting that gutted me. It was mine, or had been, from a decade ago, back when I looped my L's and crossed my T's too high. I recognized the pressure, the hesitations, even the way the M leaned slightly to the right like it wanted to escape the line. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I held it for hours like a bomb with no timer, pacing my apartment with it cupped in my palm. I made coffee, drank it cold, turned on the television, watched a full documentary about the migration of Arctic terns without hearing a single word. All the while, the letter breathed against my skin, alive and waiting. When I finally opened it, the paper inside crackled with a dry weight that made my fingers tremble. One sentence, nothing more. Fielding Street is real. You left me there. That night, I didn't sleep. I found an old map online, an archival city planning document from 1974. I cross-referenced it with current GPS coordinates, drawing lines in pen that curled like veins. Fielding Street wasn't listed anymore, not officially, but there it was in faint ink, cutting through a now-abandoned industrial zone near the river's bend. I borrowed a car from a co-worker I barely spoke to, muttering something about visiting an aunt. It was early morning when I drove out there, the sky stitched with dull pink thread and the fog thick enough to obscure the skyline behind me. The road narrowed the deeper I went. Sidewalks gave up, streetlights disappeared. The buildings became skeletal, empty frames of brick and broken signage, the kind of place memory comes to die. And then, just past a rusted train overpass, I saw it. A warped wooden sign, almost hidden behind vines. Fielding St. The letters were chipped but legible. My chest collapsed in on itself. The house was at the end of the block. 2 stories, leaning slightly, brown shutters, a green fence, half collapsed, drowning in ivy, exactly as I'd dreamed it, exactly as he had described it. I should have turned back. Every nerve in my body screamed retreat, but my feet had other ideas. They carried me to the front porch like they'd done it before. The door was unlocked. Inside, silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that waits. Dust blanketed everything, yet the air smelled faintly of cinnamon. The kitchen small, cramped, held yellow curtains fluttering with no wind. I pressed my fingers to the table. It felt warm. That's when I heard the humming, faint, just beyond the hallway. I moved slowly, each step echoing like a shout. As I turned the corner, I stopped breathing. There, in the middle of the living room, was a child. 5, maybe 6, back turned to me, humming to himself while tracing circles into the hardwood floor with a broken crayon. A toy airplane lay beside him, the exact one from the photograph. The color chipped, the tail fin cracked. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. And then he said, without turning, "You came back." My throat clenched. Who are you?" He laughed, a sound I recognized so deeply it fractured me. "I'm who you forgot to grow out of." He turned, slowly, and there he was. Me, as a child, same scar on the eyebrow, same uneven haircut, same sad, patient eyes. He stood, walked to the window, and pulled the curtain aside. Outside, in the overgrown yard, stood the homeless man, the older version, the echo, watching, waiting. "Why are you doing this?" I whispered. But the child was gone. The room was empty. Only the crayon remained, rolling gently in a spiral. And outside, the man smiled, then turned and vanished. I left the house stumbling, half blind with confusion. When I looked back, the house wasn't leaning anymore. The shutters were straight, the fence intact, like something had just remembered how it was supposed to look. Back in the car, I checked my phone. No signal. The clock had reset to 000. I hadn't just visited a place. I'd entered a fold in the map, a memory loop wearing geography like a disguise. And something had been waiting there for years, patient as dust. What if every version of you left behind still waits for closure? And what if one of them decides not to wait anymore? I didn't go home. I couldn't. The idea of my apartment, of folding back into my routines, the coffee machine sputtering in the morning, the cracked tile in the bathroom mirror, my name on the mail, felt foreign now, like someone else's life I'd borrowed by mistake. Instead, I checked into a motel 2 towns over, room 16, overlooking a parking lot of half-dead cars. The wallpaper peeled in vertical lines, like it was trying to escape upward. I sat on the bed and stared at the carpet until the patterns began to swim. I thought about calling someone, but I couldn't explain what had happened. The child, the house, the man, the unbearable echo of myself in each of them. And more than that, I was afraid of how easily I'd accepted it all, as if some dormant chamber in my mind had been waiting to be unlocked, not shocked, just returned. That night, I heard him, not the child, not the man, but a voice inside, mine, but not. He spoke with a gravity I didn't know my voice could carry, like it had aged through grief. I hadn't lived yet. "You're not lost," it said. "You're divided." I wrote the words down, and more came. Whole sentences, fragments, questions. What happens to the parts of us we silence? When you forgot the house, did you forget who lived in it too? You buried your name like a body. Did you think it wouldn't grow something back? Sleep came in broken flashes. I'd close my eyes and see reflections, hundreds of them, each version of me paused in some invisible corridor, watching me with recognition but no warmth. One of them mouthed something again and again. Let me back in. The next morning, the notebook was full. Pages I hadn't written. More diagrams. More dreams. A sketch of the Fielding house, drawn from memory. Only now, there were dates scribbled in the margins. Birthdays, maybe, or deaths. Some circled, some crossed out. And in the center, underlined over and over, Eli. The name was tightening around me now, like a garment worn too long. It wasn't mine, but it was. Not given, not chosen, inherited. Back in the city, things unraveled faster. At work, a colleague pulled me aside and asked why I'd been signing emails with a different last name. I hadn't, but when I checked my sent folder, there it was, Eli Marrow. I didn't know a Marrow. I had never used that name. Except I had. Years ago. a pen name I'd scribbled into a high school notebook for the stories I never showed anyone. Dark, looping tales of children who vanished and returned wrong. I'd buried those notebooks in my parents' attic before they moved. Except my parents never had an attic. Except I began losing time. Minutes at first, then hours. I'd find myself in places I didn't remember walking to, sitting in a library I hadn't visited since I was a teenager, thumbing through books with my initials in the margins. A librarian smiled at me like we were old friends, called me Eli, told me it was good to see me again. I didn't correct her. What would I say? I began to fear mirrors, not because they reflected something strange, but because they didn't. They showed me exactly as I looked. No distortion, no shimmer of wrongness. Just me, but something behind the eyes was missing. Not dark, but hollowed out, like a photograph where someone had tried to erase part of the image with their thumb. One night, I found a voicemail on my phone. No number, just static at first, then a voice, mine, but cracked, weathered. I tried to carry you as long as I could, it said, but you keep letting go. Do you know what it's like to rot beneath your own name? Click. That night, I found the mirror cracked, a single long fracture from top to bottom, not shattered, just divided. Like me, there is a specific terror that comes not from seeing something unfamiliar, but from seeing something known in the wrong place. My voice on someone else's tape, my name on someone else's face, my memories playing back with the wrong narrator. I began to wonder, what if forgetting isn't passive? What if it's violent? What if I exiled parts of myself on purpose and they've been building their own version of me ever since? What if I'm not fragmenting? What if I'm converging? And what waits for me at the center of that convergence? If the self you left behind became strong enough to return, would you recognize it, or would it recognize you first? There are nights now when I wake inside a name I don't remember choosing. It clings to the inside of my mouth like smoke. I try to swallow, and it burns. Sometimes it's Eli, sometimes it's my name, the real one, or what I thought was real. But other times, it's something older, something with no vowels, just breath and ache. I don't live in time anymore, not properly. Hours fold, days echo. I'll walk into a room and find something from childhood placed gently on the table. A toy soldier, a lock of blonde hair tied with blue ribbon, a grocery list written in my mother's hand, though I haven't seen her handwriting in decades. She's been dead for 23 years. But here's the problem. I remember her dying twice. Once in a car crash when I was 2. Once in a hospital bed when I was 19. Both memories feel whole, both carry grief, both taste like truth. Which means one is false, or both are. Or I'm not the only one dreaming through this body. The city has begun changing too. Familiar streets curl differently now, subtly warped, like a photocopy of a photocopy. Landmarks disappear, or worse, they persist with names that feel wrong. The coffee shop where I spent years writing has become a laundromat. The bridge I used to cross to work ends in a wall, and the people, they stare at me like I'm interrupting something delicate, like I've arrived early to a life still being assembled. I saw him again last night. Not the boy, not the man. The third. He wore my face, perfectly, but not my posture, not my breath. He stood straighter, moved slower, as if gravity meant something different to him. He watched me from across the street, not hidden, just present, daring me to acknowledge him. When I finally stepped forward, he smiled. Not cruel, not kind, certain. You made me when you forgot how to cry, he said. You needed someone to carry the grief you couldn't survive. I opened my mouth, but no sound came. I felt the shape of 100 questions crowding behind my teeth, none willing to be first. He stepped closer. I'm not your shadow, he said. I'm the light you exiled to keep your narrative clean. Then he touched my chest. Not hard, just a palm. Warm, alive, and everything folded. I saw every version of myself I'd ever denied. The boy who cried when his father yelled, the teenager who wanted to disappear into music, the man who fell in love and ran from it, the version of me that wanted children, the one who feared them, the one who wrote stories about death and hid them in drawers. I saw them standing in a field made of memory, and one by one, they turned their backs to me. Only one remained, the child. He stared at me with such naked grief, I felt my knees buckle. You're not broken, he said softly. You're layered. Then he took my hand and placed something in it. A shard of mirror. I looked into it, expecting to see my reflection. But it wasn't a face. It was a doorway, framed by memory, pulsing with light. And on the other side, the Fielding house, alive, whole, lit from within. I stepped forward, but not through. I woke in the motel. The mirror unbroken, the shard gone. Only a single note left on the pillow, written in that old looping script. When you are ready to remember everything, the door will open from the inside. I don't know if I believe in God, but I believe in recursion. I believe in names that live longer than bodies. I believe in memory as a terrain you can be exiled from, and I believe in the terror of returning home to find yourself already there, living a better life without you. Smas, what if healing isn't reclaiming the past, but letting all your versions mourn you in peace? And if they do, who then are you allowed to become?